Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited today. I have my friend Bob Sager with me. Bob and I are blessed. We've both met through the Go Giver community. Bob, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we're going to go off on a weird tangent and talk about the scientific brain that you are so known for.
Yeah. So my story is a long and winding road, but yeah, I'm the founder of a company called Spearpoint Solutions. The company was founded in 2007, but we really didn't start in business till 2008 in any sort of meaningful way. And we do two things. We teach scientific creative thinking and specifically how to apply that to business. And then we use those same principles that we teach to others to design simple, unique, and profitable business strategies for our clients.
I love that. Now, we were talking earlier about how we've been following Bob Berg and John David Mann and how authentic both of them are. And I just want to bring that back to you because you and I are here together because we were talking online. And by the way, a lot of people say LinkedIn doesn't work. I disagree. What I'm recognizing, and I think you do this as well, LinkedIn with the algorithm is a bit of a crapshoot. But LinkedIn, if you engage with humans authentically, that's where real magic happens. Is that a fair comment?
Oh, no, I completely agree. What it reminds me of is, for years and years and years, I have said that there are five forms of wealth, and relationships are definitely one of those, and relationships of all kinds, whether it's personal or business. I think you need to value and nurture those.
I love that. And I think that's the piece. We were talking about a post where you had created your list of 50 people to watch on LinkedIn. And I see you, game recognizes game, but what I see you doing, and this is very much Go Giver, the 5 laws of stratospheric success, you're amplifying and elevating other people for the sake of you're just fascinated by these people and you want to get to know them better. I think a lot of people are seeing that energy and responding because that's how I approach LinkedIn. Now let's switch to the creative and the science, because most people will tell you it's like science and religion, they don't come together. But I see science and creativity very natural partners. So how did that evolution come up as you were forming and growing Spearpoint?
Well, one of the things that I've observed is that almost everybody has ideas all the time, and they occasionally even have good ideas, right? People think, well, I've heard this. I'm going to call BS on this. I've heard people say, "Oh, ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is everything." Well, that's not true, right? Yeah, ideas might be a dime a dozen, but good ideas are far more rare, and so therefore far more valuable. And but what I found is that when the pressure is on and you need to come up with a better idea, let's go back to a little bit of biology, right? Beyond studying scientific creative thinking methods and teaching those to others and applying them to business strategy design that we do, I have studied a lot about behavioral science. And when I first started studying that, Jeff, I had no idea that there was an official name for it. I just called it the psychology, sociology, and biology of human action and decision making. Now that's not very pithy, right?
No.
Behavioral science is a little easier that rolls off the tongue a little easier. But one
Yeah.
of the things that I found is that there's a biological imperative. Once we have figured out a problem, we figured out a solution to a problem, or figured out how to do something, we move that how to a subconscious process. And the reason that we do that is biologically imperative. Conscious thought burns lots of calories.
Yeah.
And so the fewer things we have to consciously think about, the better off we are, and the more likely we are to survive. So that biologically, we move things once we figured out how to do them to a subconscious process, and that serves us well most of the time. The problem comes in is when those same solutions aren't working so well anymore, or aren't working at all. And so then we set about to try to think about things, but the subconscious rules, right?
Yeah.
It's responsible for 90 to 95% of our actions without us even being consciously aware of it. And so we think we're thinking hard about things, and we think maybe even we're thinking creatively or innovatively about it, but it's like driving 100 miles an hour on a circular freeway. No matter how hard we think about it, we end up in the same place, right? And so if we make any improvement at all, it's at the margins, and that's usually not very good. And so when we I call them scientific creative thinking methods, because what they do is they have the effect of disengaging that autopilot thinking, and they help us take an exit ramp off of that circular freeway so we can go explore new territory. And we found that when people put any sort of earnest effort into it, everybody's creative. A lot of people just aren't aware of it. And so by using these methods, and we use them in a gamified way. I invented a creative thinking game that we utilize in our training called What's the Big Idea? And it's at the heart, no matter which of these methods we're teaching, that creative competitive game is at the heart of it. And it makes the process fun. The process of coming up with ideas, it makes that process fun. And that's important, because when something feels like work, people have a tendency to want to do less of it. And when it feels like fun, people want to do more of it. I mean, there aren't too many people that are doing accounting on the weekend for relaxation, right?
Nope. Sad to say. Now, I want to pull a few of those things back because, for what it's worth, I spent the good majority of my life thinking that human beings were rational. You can laugh at that because I am. So I'm on a couple of spectrums, but the relevant one here is autistic. I can be very, very literal. And if somebody comes to me and says, Jeff, I have a pain, I will come up with an elegant solution. And then watch in awe as they walk away with the pain intact, going, okay, next. And I was like, that's not rational. And I'm not kidding. Probably about 2 years ago, I went, wait a minute. I'm starting to think my bias was that humans were rational. What if I explored that maybe they're not? And then in that irrationality, I discovered the nervous system and the parasympathetic system and all of these things that shape what we do below that line of consciousness. And so you and I were meant to have this conversation because I'm obsessed with gamification. I'm obsessed with neuroscience. And I think there's an element, as you said, and for me, if it's not fun, I can't convince myself to do it. I mean, you can whip this poor horse all you want. It's having none of that. But if it's fun, I will get lost in something for days. So I think it's, you and I are going to have more fun and more conversations about this. So how did you come up with what's the big idea? Because to me, that's a level of metacognition. And I know that's a new buzzword, but thinking about thinking fascinates me. And I think a lot of people don't do that. So how did the idea of what's the big idea evolve? What was the spark?
That's an excellent question. So when I first started studying about creative thinking, I read a book, which is sort of a compendium on creative thinking methods, at least the ones that were known at the time that the author, Michael Michalko, wrote it. And I started playing around with those myself, and I was in my 40s then. So it's been a minute ago. And prior to that point, people laugh at this when I tell them this now, but I didn't think of myself as a creative person. And I started playing around with only one of the methods in that book, called combinatory play, which I learned later was both Einstein and Da Vinci's favorite creative thinking method. And so I started playing around with just that one simple method at first, and Jeff, I was stunned at the ideas that I was coming up with. In fact, I remember like glancing around going, where are these ideas coming from? They can't be coming from me because I'm not creative, right? And so I thought to myself, if people would use this method, and then of course it evolved into other methods later, but I said, if people would use this method consistently, they would be just like me. They would shock themselves at the ideas that they would come up with. But I then further thought, but how can you get them to use it consistently? That was my big challenge. And I thought about it for quite some time, for a few weeks. And then I was driving along in the car one day, and seemingly just seemingly out of the blue, the idea that it is almost like it was divinely spoken to me. It has to be a game. And I excitedly rushed in the door, and literally the entire how it should work was in my head. And I just wrote it all down on paper, and then set about creating it. We created a beta version at first, and then, more of an official, pretty version later. And it was just, I'm sure people have had those I don't even know what you call it exactly, but I call it sort of divinely inspired ideas. And so you do get those now and then, if you're thinking about it. But the problem, especially in the age of AI, is we need to be more consistent in our creative thinking. And so what I wanted to do is put scientific creative thinking methods, and we teach a few different ones, into a format where it feels like fun as opposed to feeling like work, and where people can, even under pressure, utilize one or more of these ideas, sort of an arrow in their quiver, or a tool in their toolbox, to come up with better ideas on demand. And it's astounding.
You've literally built the system to create divine inspiration. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I think that is fair. And we call it divine intervention because we don't know where it comes from, right? Yeah. Out of the blue is somewhere beyond us. And I do believe that our subconscious mind is connected to knowledge and inspiration that comes from sources we have no clue about, right? Yeah. Whether you call that divinity, whether you call it the universe. Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, called it infinite intelligence, right? Yeah. And so the better you are at tapping into that, the better off you're going to be at coming up with ideas that are not a dime a dozen.
Well, and I think that's when we get in our heads, the dime a dozen ideas just come out like you're a blackjack dealer. You can get them out, but it's that inspiration ones that you need to cultivate the soil and be ready for it. So two of my favorite thinkers are Da Vinci and Einstein, and oddly, I never quite connected him quite that way. I know Einstein was goofy as could be, and he loved to play, and he was a child. And I'm like, yeah, that's me some days. But what I'm seeing is, in hindsight, the rigor that Da Vinci put into his thinking that made all of his inspirations that he documented in his many notebooks a given. But clearly, I feel like he had cracked the code, and then it was lost to time, and now you've rediscovered that, because how many of us have entered that flow state? And brainstorming can be a solo act, it can be a group activity, but if you're stuck in your head, you're only thinking about, what do I know about this problem? How do I solve it? I love, and by the way, this is where I play with AI a lot. I say, give me the wildest, craziest, stupidest idea you can. And then I look at, what if that was the right answer? How would it look? So let's talk about your process, because I think more people need to meet you, Bob. Obviously, that's why I have you on the show. But how can they learn more about creating those spark moments? And for what it's worth, I interchange universe, God, whatever it is, but to me it's all about connecting to source. We're not creating as humans, we're creating as a collective in some way. And Napoleon's Hill was onto something. So how do you help people who believe they're not creative, because I'm guessing you get a lot of people who aren't? How do you help them let go of that bias so that they can be creative until they learn how to be creative, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. So if they're in a training session with us that we do, corporately, typically they're there in a group. And so let me give you an idea how the what's the big idea game works, and you'll see through that experiential process, people, it dawns upon them that, hey, maybe I am creative. And so here's how the game works. People get a set of random words, and they're assigned. This is one of the methods called combinatory play. And let me step back just a second, Jeff, and let me say that before I explain that process, people do not think in words. They think in pictures, right? And so, for example, if I say the word dog to you, you're not thinking of the pictures of the letters D, O, and G. You're thinking of the picture of a dog, right? Probably a dog you're familiar with. Maybe if you own a dog, you're thinking of that dog, right? And so if I say the word kitchen to you, you're thinking of the image of a kitchen. Now, that's probably the kitchen, in your home or apartment. If you work in a restaurant, it might be the kitchen, in the restaurant. But if I say to you, listen, what we're going to do is we're going to combine dog and kitchen, and we're going to come up with an idea for a new product, service, or business. All of a sudden, that combination of dog and kitchen, or kitchen dog, it starts to develop other ideas. Those two words in combination spark new ideas that are related, but you would not have thought of otherwise without having first made that combination. So in the What's the Big Idea game, to get people's creative juices flowing in order to facilitate teaching the other concepts, we use that combinatory play concept. And we have three teams. We have an inventor or entrepreneur team, we have a competitor team, and we have a customer team. And so the entrepreneur team and the competitor team each get a separate set of 10 words, and they combine any two of those words to come up with an idea for a product, service, or business, either brand new or an enhancement on something that already exists. They get 3 minutes to do that. 3 minutes concurrently. And at the end of 3 minutes, each team takes about a minute and presents to the customer team what it is, how it works, what the benefits are. And then the customer team decides, do I like idea A better? Do I like idea B better? And so, but typically that's done in a team format, right? The customer team or the inventor team, they'll have 3, 4, 5 people on a team. We try not to get more than about 6. If we get a huge crowd, we just get a little creative in dividing up the teams. And so, and I've had people tell me, after that first session, we'll have a break, and people will come up to me and overtly tell me, man, I'm way more creative than I thought I was. Like I'm better than I've been giving myself credit for.
Yeah.
And it alters their view of what's possible for them to accomplish in the world. just in that short amount of time. And those that don't overtly tell you, you can tell by the change in their physiology that
Yeah.
they have changed their opinion of themselves. And I love that, Jeff.
That is one of my favorite moments. For what it's worth, I also grew up thinking I'm logical, this. And then one day I was like, wait a minute, I'm a creator. And so I'm fascinated. And, the world is, we hear about all of the incremental creators, the ones who, make things slightly better. But history is made by the disruptors and the innovators who took A and B, crammed it together, and said, okay, this is what we're going to create. I love this process. And for what it's worth, I really, really want to play now because, that's just one of the tools in your quiver, the
Right.
combining combinatory play. I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. I'm going to ask some really practical questions now because part of the show is people see this, they've watched this far, and they go, I like Bob, how do we work together? So you mentioned that you do, it's what I'm sensing is sort of a workshop type environment. Who's typically bringing you in? What's, the job title? Who's raising their hand saying, Bob, you got to come in?
It kind of depends on the size of the organization. If it's a little bit smaller organization, it might be an owner or general manager. But often in a little bit more larger corporations, it's somebody in HR, or somebody that is a training director. And training directors, I don't know if you've seen this, Jeff, but training directors, certainly they have internal stuff that they do, but they're also responsible for sourcing third-party vendors to come in and do some training. So, and the types of organizations, I mean, it's run the gamut from business to consumer. We've done some training with Choice Hotels, their organization. We've done just a few months back some training with a regional bank that's Virginia, North Carolina as their primary footprint. But we've done B2B organizations as well. So, the bottom line is 100% of customers are people. And so, you've got to be able to, relate to people no matter who you're selling to. Right. And so, and internally, that's people too, right? So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, you're breaking my brain a little, Bob.
Yeah, so it's essentially any organization that they'd really like to sell more,
yeah,
for higher margins, right? I call it sell more without competing on price.
Amen. When I say you're breaking my brain, that is the highest compliment I can ever pay to another human being, by the way. I'm envisioning, I don't know if you've read, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a book called, I think, The Fish Methodology. And it's a guy who studied a Seattle fish market, and everybody's throwing fish and having fun. And I'm envisioning what's the big idea game in the most mundane, boring, stuffy corporate environments like accounting, banking. And I feel like that would unlock, because most of them are not people. They're, in accounting, you have to find things more interesting than people. Otherwise, you're distracted by the people. But I feel like you're breaking down that left-right brain, rational and fun, because accounting can be fun. It should be fun. But for some reason, some guy 400 years ago told us it should be boring and straight. And we all went, okay. And we stuck with it. I think it would be fascinating. I used to work with a lot of accountants. They're my people. Most of them are on some sort of spectrum. They tend to be introverts, but they are smart and they are creative, and they also care deeply about their clients. I feel like you're giving people permission to play and to care. Is that reading too much into it?
Oh, no, not at all. I had the opportunity many years ago now to be a guest professor for a day with at the University of Cincinnati with a design thinking class. And I remember we had the professor for that class after the session was over, and we had like 70 kids. It was so much fun. And so, but after the session was over, I had the professor make some comments as a kind of a review for it. And he said, one of the things that we teach in this class is the value of play. And people, when you're just all serious and buttoned up and following process and procedure, you have a tendency to lose that. But and it's an observation that I made as I thought about the life cycle of human beings. We're all born as creative thinkers, and if you observe kids, preschoolers, all they do all day long is learn new things and imagine new possibilities. Then, Jeff, we ship them off to school.
We break
and train that out
souls.
of them, right? and if not trained out per se, it's definitely not fostered and encouraged, right? And so the problem with being a kid is you don't know much, you don't have any life experience to speak of to apply that natural, creative imagination to. Then you've got some education and some life experience, some knowledge as an adult, but that ability that you were born with has atrophied. And so it's not gone, it's just atrophied. And like using muscles, that it has to be, you have to reacclimate yourself to doing it. And if you can do that in a fun process that facilitates you being childlike, not childish, but childlike, then some magic happens in those with that process.
So Bob, one of my favorite quotes is, we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. And honestly, right now, my gut is screaming, I wish teachers knew you. And I'm going to say this candidly. People know me, know this. I adore my kids, and they're both very special, unique thinkers. And I am like the umbrella over top of them, or the barrier wall. I'm keeping that spark alive. Well, by God, the teachers are trying to suck the life out of them and make them conform. And I undo it in the car every day, because I'm like, okay, what conformity did you learn today? Okay, here's why that's not for you. And again, I'm not saying be radical and be rebels, but the very fact, I think, sorry, I'm going to rant because I get really passionate. Education should be fun. If it's not fun, you are doing it wrong. And I've observed my kids. So in the company that I run, my boys are chief fun officers, and their job. So what we do, I call it car coaching, and you're now going to be part of the car coaching. Usually it's whatever Bob Berg posted today. We talk about that in the car. And then I apply it to their video games, because, I have kids who apparently don't pay attention, but they're bored. Whereas they come home and they'll play a video game for an hour and they can tell you every character and their backstory. And I'm like, is this not an academic problem? This is an interest problem. So I've been asking them how what they learned in the day could impact or be impacted in a video game. And so we're learning the economics of gameplay. We're learning the mechanics of fun. So just fair warning, you're now going to be part of car coaching, because one of the teachers said your eldest needs to pay attention more in class. And me being me, last parent-teacher interview I was invited to, by the way, I said, perhaps you could try to be more interesting. Valid feedback, in my opinion, but not received well. But honestly, wouldn't it be nice if teachers were playing what's the big idea instead of want, here's the boring topic?
Yeah, for sure. And I, one of my visions, one of my future visions is to have a nonprofit foundation that sponsors these What's the Big Idea sessions for kids, especially for kids in maybe lower level school districts that are never ever going to have the possibility of being exposed to this in any other way. And I think, when people see that hey, maybe I can actually use my brain and these natural gifts that I was given of creativity, and I can use those to create solutions that can benefit other people and benefit me at the same time. It just gives them more hope for the future and for what they can accomplish in the world. And that's and when you can do that, I think you've done something really quite noble.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I am passionate about junior achievement, and that's more high school, junior high, and Enactus, which is fascinating, doing some amazing things in the universities. I feel like both of them need more of your thinking because, again, they teach the mechanics of things, but if you don't work on the thinking skills, really, truly, everything else is just boring. You're assembling a puzzle using someone else's picture.
Right. And Seth Godin, I think, said this very well a few years ago that, in formal school to this point, for the most part, we teach people to follow a map, but we don't teach them to create their own map. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and especially, in the era we're in now where AI is so prevalent, knowledge is not that important anymore, right? It used to be knowing things was kind of the key to success, from about the 80s on, but the knowledge economy does not really exist in the age of AI. And so, a lot of people are beautifully well educated for a world that doesn't exist anymore.
I could get on that rant all day long. You and I clearly have more conversations to have. Consider me officially a Bob Sager fan. Bob, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me and joining me today. You and I are going to talk more about this, and you're going to be part of car coaching. So I want to thank you.
Well, if I can have a positive influence on some kids beyond mine, that's a good thing, Jeff.
Amen, brother.